I think we should stop buying emulators, and there's several reasons why, and I'm going to try and address them in this video. So I spend a lot of time riding my bike around the city, and it's one of the places where I actually spend time thinking and trying to unravel things in my brain, and it often looks like this, kind of like I'm in pain, to be honest. But one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is emulators, and the fact that over the last couple of years they've been huge and kind of taken over, but I don't think they're the best option for gaming. Now, of all the times for someone to be like, stop buying emulators, it's actually probably one of the best times to buy emulators because there's so many good deals on the market. Because there's so many of them, the prices are getting way more competitive. Way back when they first started kind of coming about, they could charge a lot more for them because there wasn't as many out there, but now there's tons. You can get a good price for them. Now, I'm going to say stop using emulators, but I do use emulators myself. The two that I use the most are actually the Mayu Mini Plus, and then I also use, surprised to most people, is the Powkiddy X55. It's just really nice to play and use, even though it's kind of crappy. And the buttons are really loud. Ugh. But I think emulators are amazing. The first time I ever saw one, I thought, wow, this is something that's going to change the way I can game. I can just acquire the ROMs however you acquire ROMs and play any game I want, and it's going to be amazing, and I'm going to be spoilt for choice. And I think that is one of the biggest parts of why I don't think you should do it, is the fact that I'm so spoilt for choice that I pretty much don't play any of the games that I have on there. Like, there's maybe one per device that I actually play. I mean, Crazy Taxi and Warrior Land 4. That's all I play on them. So what instead? Let's get to the point of this video. I think you should be modding Game Boys. Game Boys, the original hardware, is something that is nostalgia for a lot of people. People are going to remember the way they feel. When you play some of these retro games and games that you haven't played for many years, they will feel very different when you're playing on a console. For example, Crazy Taxi I used to play on Dreamcast mainly, but also PS2 eventually. It's nothing like playing it on this. Like, the buttons are a different way around, and like the joysticks, and there's no, like, this doesn't feel like playing a Dreamcast. It just feels like playing Crazy Taxi. And if you're going to play Crazy Taxi on most mobile devices, you can download the Crazy Taxi app that's really, really good. So why bother emulating it? I may be wrong when I say this part, but I honestly believe why a lot of people don't mod Game Boys is because they think it's really hard. I certainly was one of those people, and for a long time I was like, I want to do that, but I didn't really want to do it myself. And if you do buy a pre-modded Game Boy on wherever, Etsy, eBay, wherever else, you can sometimes pay quite a bit more. And don't get me wrong, some of these people mod Game Boys professionally and they are going to be absolutely flawless, and the soldering and blah 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 and stuff that you may not be able to do, so maybe it's worth it. But maybe you're someone like me who just really wants to kind of do it themselves and kind of have it, and want the easy way in. So when it comes to which Game Boy to mod, and I feel like we could talk about this part of the video for a long time, so maybe we'll come back to all the different mods that are out there. Maybe that's a video we can do. Let us know if you fancy that. We'll put it in the comments below. But I personally think the best Game Boy to mod is the Game Boy Advance, and it's pretty much for two reasons. This is my Game Boy Advance. It's oh gosh. This is my Game Boy Advance, currently got Emerald in it, and currently still works. It's got a nice IPS display, and it was really easy to mod myself, which we'll get onto in a moment. But the two reasons I think the Advance is the best Game Boy to mod is, one is the kind of, I was going to say the geometry then. I'm a bike guy.
I'm the bike guy round here. Remember that. Yeah, okay.
Ergonometry. Ergonomics. how it feels in your hand. It's one of the most comfortable, that's a good way of saying it, isn't it? It's the most comfortable Game Boy, I think, to play. It feels nice in hand, it's easy to hold, and the display's nice and big. The second reason is that it plays all the Game Boy games that are released. You can put all the advanced games in there, and then you can put all the regular Game Boy games in there, and the color games in there, and it just plays all of them, and it's just the right one to do, in my opinion. But how easy is it to mod a Game Boy, and in particular a Game Boy Advance? Well, why don't we go back to one of the first Game Boys I ever modded. I actually modded it for Rob, and if you don't know who that is, that's Rob. He's the other guy who runs this channel with us. There's two of us that does it, and we do weekly videos. So if you like this content so far, and I'd like to think you do, if you've watched it this far, subscribe to the channel. You won't be sorry. Let's go back to a while ago now, where I bonded a Game Boy Advance for Rob, and let's look how easy it can be. Well, first things first, you'll need a donor, and the first thing you need to do with that donor is make sure it works. So you put your AS in the back and you switch it on, but this one didn't work, so I took the AS back out and put some cheaper ones in, and it worked just fine. I always then play it a little bit for just that kind of feeling of like how different it is afterwards. So this time we're using E.T., which is a really weird game. Let me know what you think of it below if you've played it. If you haven't, don't worry about it. So now we get on to the fun part, which is taking it apart. This is not going to be in depth. Don't like get too excited here. We're just going to strip it down nice and fast. Without fail, I always give it a good old clean with some isopropyl alcohol. Make sure you get the contacts. That's the main thing I'm going for. The board in this case was pretty clean looking, but make sure you get those contacts. The shell in this case was black, and Rob wanted black buttons, but the one I got came with grey, so I got some black ones as well. So I've got some spare grey ones for whenever I need grey ones. This display is one of the non-laminated versions, so essentially you have these little plastic things to kind of lean it on because it doesn't fit directly in the shell. If you get a laminated one, generally the shells come pre-cut and you need a special shell for that. That's what my orange one is, and that's what I rate. These ones you have to stick it in, so if you ever change your mind and want to change the shell, it kind of makes that stuff harder. It works perfectly fine, looks great. But if you get the option, get a laminated one. The one I use is one from Funny Playing, which I really like. All these displays also come with these little boards that you attach, and then you can start basically putting it all back together at that point. The actual logic board itself, putting the ribbon cable bit in, this bit here, this is probably one of the hardest parts really. Just making, and it's not that it's hard, it's just to make sure it goes in correctly and properly so that it works. And then the rest of it is just literally putting it back together, whacking the screws in, and that's about it. And then look at that, look at the difference in that display. Like, you couldn't see it on camera a minute ago. These really do make a difference, but seriously, who the hell has played this game and who rates it? Because like, what do you even do? I'm so lost. Looks cool though, looks really cool. So that's how easy it is. Like, this was a very quick overview of how to mod an Advance, and I want to do a more in-depth one on how to do one of these IPS displays, because I think these ones are even easier. This, as I've mentioned before, this is the Funny Playing one, and I will do a video on that soonish. But it is such a straightforward, easy thing to do. yes, and I know you're probably typing this already, you can solder these in and they're a much better experience, the way you navigate the menus and change the way the display works and things like that. But if you're just a novice and you just want to try this, you may even have a Game Boy Advance knocking about where you're like, oh, I just want to mess about with this for a little bit. 50, 60 pounds later, you've got all the bits you need to build one of these advances. Mod it. You can mod it, and it's easy. The other thing to mention as well, a friend of mine actually wants to do it with his at the moment, and his question was, yeah, I don't really want to like mess about with it too much because then I can't go back. Doing this kind of like the non-soldering way and kind of using an IPS display that you can just drop in and something like that, like I could rebuild that into the original Advance without having to mess about too much. So that's the other thing to bear in mind. You're not really kind of just signing off your Advance forever. So it's a good way of doing it. But to my original point, why I think you should stop buying emulators, and there's two big reasons. The first one is quite literally the game libraries. Like, some of you may be some of those people that like will sit there and go through game after game after game after game after game. Emulators are for you. But if you're like me, and I feel like a lot of people, where you fill it up and you have all these ROMs and you have all these different games to play, and then you just admire your ROM set, why did you? Why don't you just get some cartridges from eBay and wherever you might find them and just narrow that game library down a little bit? It's just a thought. The other thing is the fact that I think that is a much better way of playing games than that. Although I do love this. I do love this very much. But that's kind of brought us to the end of the video, and I think, to be honest, I've opened a can of worms, and a lot of you might be putting your opinions down in the comments right now, and I welcome it. Maybe this is just part one of this conversation, and we will kind of talk about this in more detail and continue for a long period of time. I think, like, as far as the retro and modding community goes, I think this is a conversation that we probably will be having quite often. What is the best way to play games? Because I think that is the reason I do this, is the fact that there is so many different ways to play your games now compared to the way there was, and that's what makes it exciting. So what is your favourite way of playing games? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a like, comment below, and subscribe so you don't miss out next week's video, which is probably going to be very good.